And now, I would like to request our respected principal, sir, to please come up on stage and share a few more lines about our honorable speaker.
Very good morning to all. My esteemed colleague, our revered Sri Bagchi sir, my dear friends, students, it is indeed a practice here that we have foundation course. And when it is foundation course, you need to have good founder to create a foundation amongst you, in you. So this time we have requested such founders. We have made foundations for them and for others who have brought laurels to the country, have got acclaimed around the globe. And it is a privilege and a pride moment for me to introduce such a founder having a reputation, recognition, acclaim, accolade all throughout the world. Now, I think when he came here and I received him, rather he received me, I came a little late, I'm sorry for that. So, when I was going through his bio sketch, he said, you need not tell anything. Just tell whatever you feel is required. But when I went through, I felt that if I do not tell everything about it, I will be really doing injustice to you people as students. So I thought I will definitely mention each part of it. A man with so many ingredients to his, achievements, to his credits, and a man who has laid a vision long back and which is now bearing all the fruits and outcomes. I present before you Dr. Subroto Bagchi, now who is working now as the chairman of Odisha Skill Development Authority. His present charter is to create employable skills for 1.5 million youth by 2024. That is the vision. Mostly the school dropouts. This is a full-time assignment in the rank of a cabinet minister. For his service to the state, he takes a salary of just ₹1 a year. So this is more of a charity, and I think this is unbelievable. Because somebody has to take a token amount that the reason possibly he is taking. Mr. Bagchi was invited by Sri Naveen Patnaik, our Honorable Chief Minister, in 2016 to set up Odisha Skill Development Authority to harmonize the various skill initiatives of the government and directly impact the skill development of 1.1 million youth under the Chief Minister's Employment Generation Program, first initiated in 2014. Upon taking charge, Mr. Bagchi has given a new sense of direction, instilled urgency, and above all, has made skill development as something aspirational in the eyes of everyone. He has led the creation of a brand called Skilled in Odisha. Under his stewardship, the government ITIs have become a vibrant and a proud institution. A partnership has been created with the Singapore government by which for the first time in the history, more than 215 ITI teachers and officials from Odisha were trained in Singapore on short-term employment-linked skill development programs like DDU GKY under the aegis of Ministry of Rural Development Government of Odisha. Been the best performing state for 3 years in a row. Odisha will soon be home to World Skill Center, an iconic institution in technical collaborations with ITES, Singapore. That would be one of the largest skill collaboration in the development centers in Odisha at an outlay of $193 million. This is a huge amount which Odisha is going to definitely utilize to the full potential. Mr. Bagchi has made Odisha a sandbox for innovation in creating the Nano Unicorn program, under which skilled youth are matched with philanthropic capital to start small business instead of becoming job seekers. This was piloted with 200 plus youth and now is being stepped up for the large scale adoption. Under Mr. Bagchi overall guidance, Odisha has now become a well-known in the world of skill development. The groundswell created by a set of leaders directly mentored by Mr. Bagchi has led to the state to bring home the first ever gold medal for India at the recently concluded World Skill Competition in Russia. As a runner-up to the World Skill Competition, Odisha ranked the number 2 state at the national level in the terms of medal tally. In addition to the leading skill development initiative of the government of Odisha, Mr. Bagchi has generously given his time and energy towards entrepreneurship development, attracting industrial investment into the state leadership development in the government and innovation in various spheres. In the wake of COVID-19, Mr. Bagchi was given the additional responsibility by Honorable Chief Minister to be the government's chief spokesperson to align the 45 million people in the state for the fight against the pandemic. As has been mentioned, we are all watching, all those days. I would like to add a little more. We are all watching those days from 3 to 4 p.m. Mr. Bagchi used to appear in the government portal. And the way he was narrating, I think, sir, you are known to each and every individual of the state, the way you have explained them, that how to keep away the corona pandemic and vis-a-vis what is the government's initiative so as to stall it. So you are a household name in the state, sir. Besides that, you are a figure in the country and in the world. Prior to his work with government of Odisha, Mr. Bagchi spent for decades with the Indian IT industry, where he is best known as a co-founder of Mindtree. I think all of you know the Mindtree is a software industry. It is one of the most leading industry in the country and most admired software companies that build the Aadhaar, which you use every day and every hour. Among these many other contributions in 2019, Mindtree revenues, unbelievable. It is $1 billion with 20,000 employees. He is the co-founder. We are privileged to have you, sir. And we know that after your address to all of our freshers, I think some will be inspired. Many will be inspired by you, looking at your personality and your vision. Mr. Bagchi is a well-known writer. He has so many. He is a multifaceted personality. The more I say, the more coming up. I am not telling anything from my mind, but these are all everything that has happened with him and what we are going to observe for the coming 1 hour. With bestsellers like High Performance Entrepreneur, Go Kiss the World, The Professional, MBA at 16, The Elephant Catchers and Sell, his latest book, Sell, received the C.K. Prahalad Award for the Best Business Book of 2018. His books have been translated in all major Indian languages as well as Chinese and Korean. Mr. Bagchi has been inducted into the Order of Engineers by the University of Florida and honored for his contribution in management and information technology by Utkal University with the honorary doctorate in literature and by the V. Surendra Sai University of Technology with an honorary doctorate of science. Now, Mr. Bagchi has served the boards of IIM Bangalore, Indian Oil, IIT Bhubaneswar, and he currently serves the board of governors of the Software Technology Parks of India. He and his writer wife, Susmita, support the cause of prevention of blindness, geriatric care, and mental health and school education, towards which they have placed their personal resources and time. The last word, the last line, I think, makes many more meaning than what we have read. Personal resources and time. A man with a vision who has spared none of his talents and resources for the development of our state at the present. And I will just add one more thing. He was the person who gave us the idea that there is a more college scheme which is being launched from 1st January. We met in December, and we have registered in the more college scheme. And please give him a light up. His personal resources is going to enrich us. His personal resources, he was the first person to say that I will be there to contribute in the more college scheme. We are grateful, sir. And I am sorry, this is only what I have read a part of his personality. I have not read in completeness. I might have missed many, which possibly you might discover in him when you are interacting with him. With these few words, I would request our esteemed guest, Dr. Bagchi, to come on dais and interact with you.
So Dr. Datteswar Hota, my very close friend, mentor in many ways, Dr. Vidyut Das, I want to particularly also call out the members of faculty who are here, and above all else, my young friends who are joining the world of healing today. Whenever I come to the SCB Medical College, for me it is a way to repay a very tiny debt that I have, which I actually can never repay. My wife, Susmita, about whom Dr. Hota talked about, was born in this hospital. We have 2 daughters, and both the daughters were born in SCB Medical College. So I cannot repay the debt that the 3 most important women in my life actually were born in this sacred space. So I can never refuse any time that Dr. Vidyut Das or Dr. Hota would ask me to come here. I'm happy to clean your toilets, not just to deliver a big speech to you. Because gratitude is the most important thing in life. If we don't have gratitude, then this life is not worth living. So in that context, when Dr. Vidyut Das and Dr. Hota told me to talk to you about interpersonal skills, I was more than happy to do it, but I am deeply aware that I am talking to the medical fraternity of the future. So while talking about interpersonal skills, today I would like to talk about mostly 3 things. One is about the nature of intelligence, because the foundation of interpersonal skills is actually in the idea of intelligence. But I would also like to talk to you about signals. Signals and feelings. Intelligence may be a platform, but the platform's job is to process signals and feelings. And that is why I have this picture in front of you, the picture of the brain, which is the repository of our intelligence, some of our intelligence. Now, let me start by talking to you about the brain itself. I was very lucky to meet a lot of people who do a tremendous amount of work in neuroscience. And one of them is an unusual woman called Dr. Tara Tyagarajan, who you can research, who was actually a student of mathematics and then took an MBA from Kellogg. But when she was studying there, in the same campus, there was a neuroscience lab, and she used to drop in there to see what is going on. And one day, the head of the department there found her curiosity to be interesting and said, "Why don't you come inside the lab and do a little experiment by yourself?" So that is how she was initiated into neuroscience. So mathematics MBA, got initiated in neuroscience. And finally, she took her PhD in neuroscience from Stanford University. And I want to talk to you a little bit about her research work. And that is why I have this picture of the brain cell here. Now, this is what your brain cell looks like. And as all of you know, that we have more than 100 billion brain cells. So what Dr. Tara Tyagarajan did is one of her experiments is she took a bunch of brain cells, and you can see the brain cells here who's got tentacles. So the nucleus is there, and then it is surrounded by other forms, and finally the brain cells have tentacles. Now with these tentacles, they reach out to the other brain cells, and there's a synaptic space with which they actually interact with each other. Every thought is nothing but an electrical charge. So the brain cells are continuously sending electrical charges and receiving electrical charges, which then become thoughts. And at any point in time, a brain cell is not just talking to the neighbor, but talking through the neighbor to other neighbors, and maybe in communication with more than 10,000 cells at any point in time. So what Dr. Tara Tyagarajan did is something interesting. She took these cells and kept them in petri dishes, and she cut off the tentacles. So you can see that this cell has hands and legs, many hands and legs. So what she did was she physically cut off these hands and legs, left them in the petri dish, closed her lab, and went away for 3 weeks. And when she came back after 3 weeks, she found something interesting. She found that they had regrown their hands and legs, and they were humming with activity. They were continuing to communicate with each other. This is very interesting because it immediately told her that the idea of coexistence with other human beings is something that is hardwired inside us. We are designed to communicate. We are designed to live with others. We are designed to give to others and to receive from others. So it's not a random thing. It's not random because whatever human beings do, they do it in the image of the brain. So if you look at the human brain, whatever it is doing internally, however it looks internally, the external world is a manifestation of that. So if you look at, for example, the picture of the Earth from a satellite at night, you'll find lit up portions which are cities. And cities are actually designed in the same way that the brain looks like, in an anatomical way, the same way that the brain cells are connected. They coexist with each other. We build cities like this. We build institutions like this. That is why when you look at institutions like SCB Medical College, we say that it is not just the individuals, but the meta-intelligence. So we design institutions, we design cities, we design nations, we design races, okay? The same way that internally we are designed. Now, Tara Tyagarajan tells us that we are designed to reach out to each other. We are designed to communicate with each other. And communication is integral. It is not a nice to do thing. It is hardwired in the brain. And we are designed for give and take. So if you look at this idea, then it will become very clear to you that this is not something esoteric and nice to do. If we are not doing what the brain cell is doing, then we do not exist. We cannot exist. One of the many things that this collection of 100 billion brain cells do is to hold together intelligence. And I was telling you a little while ago that I'm going to talk to you about signals and feelings and intelligence. So intelligence is a toolkit. And for a long time, we actually didn't fully understand, we still don't fully understand how intelligence works and what is intelligence. So it is work in progress, and our understanding of intelligence remains imperfect. But some of the people who have reflected on the idea of intelligence, which is our toolkit, One of those people happened to be a Harvard professor of psychology called Howard Gardner. And this is a man who has deeply impacted me with his theory of multiple intelligences. So Howard Gardner tells us, breaks conventional thinking until the last century, that intelligence is one thing. And Howard Gardner said, no, it's not one thing. Actually, we are endowed with at least 9 kinds of intelligence. She wrote a famous book called Multiple Intelligences, and also a book called 5 Minds for the Future. 5 Minds of the Future, not 4, 5 Minds of the Future. So whenever you have the time, look out for these 2 books by Howard Gardner, among his many, many books. So what kind of intelligence? First and foremost, we have something called logical and mathematical intelligence. See that blur? Logical and mathematical intelligence. For many decades, we thought that this is intelligence. And that is how the IQ theory was brought out. IQ essentially is about logical and mathematical capability. If, then, else capability. The capability to see the connection between cause and effect. So we really thought that logical and mathematical intelligence is the intelligence. But Howard Gardner tells us, no, that's not true. There are other kinds of intelligence. For example, there's something called spatial intelligence. Some people have the capability, more than others, to determine space, to navigate through space. You take me and you take Dr. Das and drop us in an alien land. I may be lost to find directions, and Dr. Das may quickly assimilate the space around and find his way around. So he's actually activating his spatial intelligence far more than I am able to do. Architects have spatial intelligence. So how do you navigate space? Space is a very important construct. Then there's musical intelligence. Not just the ability to sing, or not just the ability to play music. We are all gifted with musical intelligence. That is why when a mother sings a lullaby, the child immediately responds. We seek harmony. Music is about pattern, and music is about harmony. And everybody has musical intelligence, whether or not you are able to sing or play a musical instrument. It has its own place. Then there's kinesthetic intelligence. You know, if you look at Dhoni picking up a bat, those of you who don't know, Dr. Vidyut Das was a legendary cricketer in his time. So when he would pick up the bat and a ball is approaching at 80 kilometers per hour, the brain has no time to process whether he should duck the ball or he should hook the ball. In fact, if you are trying to think there and analyze rationally, then you'll be dead. There is no time to think. Yet, the stroke happens. You make a decision whether to hit the boundary or to duck, and that happens in a nanosecond. So if the brain doesn't have time to process, how did that happen? It happened because the individual is gifted with kinesthetic intelligence. There is muscle memory. The fingers or the hand holding the bat takes the decision. Now, if you look at Dhoni or look at Dr. Vidyut Das, the famous cricketer of his time, is gifted with kinesthetic intelligence, but so is a surgeon. A surgeon must have a high degree of kinesthetic intelligence. You should be able to, if you're a scrub nurse, you must have a high degree of kinesthetic intelligence, because in an operation theater, there's no time to think. In a triage room, there's no time to think. So, people in the medical field have to be particularly aware of kinesthetic intelligence. Then there is intrapersonal intelligence. Some people are better than others in terms of dealing with people. So, I'm sorry, interpersonal is what I meant. But even before that, intrapersonal intelligence, meaning within me. There is a form of intelligence that builds self-awareness. Who am I? What I'm here for? What is my purpose? If my intrapersonal intelligence is poor, then if I don't know myself, then it will be very difficult for me to deal with other people. So the brain cell, which is not in isolation, but its fundamental job is to connect with other brain cells, that brain cell within itself must function properly. So just the same way, I within myself must function properly before I can touch you. So intrapersonal awareness is very important, so that I have interpersonal awareness. So the interpersonal skills that we talked about right in the morning as the theme of our conversation actually must have a basis in intrapersonal. So intrapersonal intelligence, then you have interpersonal intelligence, and there are some people who are gifted with naturalistic intelligence more than other people. Everybody has it, but some are more gifted with naturalistic intelligence. People who can work with animals, people who can work with plants, people who can work with, phenomena in nature beyond plants and animals. So this is about naturalistic intelligence. And then Howard Gardner talks about the ninth intelligence, and he initially started with the idea of spiritual intelligence, but in the Western parlance, it can lead to many different interpretations. So instead, he used the word existential intelligence. This is also a form of intelligence. So if you go to many hospitals in the world, you will find that there's a temple inside, there's a chapel inside, there's a mosque inside. So healing begins there. Even before you see the doctor, the healing begins there. Most doctors are deeply spiritual. That is because only when you open up a body or you're dealing with a patient, then you realize that actually you are in contact with God. You're about to do a complex surgery. You're not sure of the outcome. It's a stressful moment, and a doctor just stops on the way for just a second and prays. And in that moment gets connected to a sense of calm and then goes about doing his or her work. That particular doctor has more awakened existential intelligence or spiritual intelligence than other people. So there's the 9 different forms of intelligence that each one of us is gifted with. And we need to be in touch with these 9 forms of intelligence. Now, this idea of multiple intelligence, at later time, where it distinguishes multiple intelligences beyond just mathological capability, actually found ground when a man called Daniel Goleman talked about not just IQ but EQ, emotional quotient, not just intelligence quotient. This came to be known as emotional intelligence. And when you talk about interpersonal relationship, emotional quotient must be of a very high order. What is emotional quotient? It begins with self-management. We talked about intrapersonal intelligence earlier. If I were to able to manage others, first I need to learn how to manage myself. So self-management. Then social awareness. Who is who? Who do I depend on? Who depends on me? So we need social awareness just the same way that the brain cell is socially aware of the other 100 billion brain cells that it needs to work with. It's a society unto itself. Then there is what is called relationship management, and all these things actually lead to self-awareness, which becomes the basis of all interpersonal relationships. So Daniel Goleman actually wrote this book called Emotional Intelligence, and Working with Emotional Intelligence is another book that I would very strongly recommend that you read alongside your medical text. So read Howard Gardner, read Daniel Goleman to understand the nature of intelligence itself. Now, if you look at all the intelligences that we talk about the 9 forms of intelligence, we talk about EQ. All these things then lead to this singular idea called empathy. Among the many forms of interpersonal relationships, the foundational aspect is empathy. Now, the other foundational aspect is communication. Empathy and communication. There are a few others. There are 7 others, really. I'll talk briefly about. But today I want to mostly talk to you about these 2 elemental, foundational aspects of interpersonal relationship. One being empathy, and the other is communication. Empathy is critical. Empathy is the ability to feel what you feel. I need to feel what you are feeling, not what you are saying, not what you are externally projecting, but how you are feeling. Feelings are very interesting. Feelings are rooted in emotion. The word emotion is a connection between E and motion. The original meaning of the word emotion actually had Latin roots. It means feelings that move. So emotions are feelings that move. So you have feelings and I have feelings. And your feelings must move me and my feelings. That is the core of empathy. And empathy is not just a touchy-feely psychological voodoo. Empathy is a deeply anatomical thing. So if you look at people with autism disorder, for example, have low empathetic skills for reasons that I will talk to you about later. So some people are more empathetic than other people. And there's an anatomical base to it. If we were to talk about interpersonal skills, we have to deeply understand the nature of empathy. And the nature of empathy relates to the idea of intelligence, which relates to the idea of brain. Now, if we are hardwired for certain things in the brain, then the question that comes up is, can we, if I have empathy or I don't have empathy, is it a binary situation? Can empathy be learned? Can empathy be acquired? If everything is actually hardwired inside the brain, how will I awaken my idea of empathy? Now, this chart here tells you about the plasticity of the brain, plasticity of the human brain. The human brain is not spastic, it is plastic. Some of it is spastic. If you look at the amygdala, for example, it's a BIOS, it's a basic input-output system at the base of the brain. The amygdalic brain is what you are factory fitted with. You can't tamper that, you don't change that. But if you look at the neocortical brain, it is largely plastic. It is moldable, it is malleable. That is the meaning of plasticity. So synaptic activation is possible. And if you have weak synaptic activation, then your behavior doesn't change. But with strong and frequent activation, you change the synaptic structure, and the connection of the synaptic structures strengthen. That have implications. And those implications actually are not just about seminars and training, but finally it is about ongoing reinforcement to change behavior. And you can of course use technology to further do frequent activation of the synapses. So the brain, a lot of the brain is plastic, and if we are not naturally empathetic, everybody is naturally empathetic, but if we think that we are not naturally empathetic, then we can learn empathy. Particularly in the medical profession, it is all about empathy. Now, if you look at empathy as a subject, and if you understand that we can learn to be empathetic, we need to now understand the connection between empathy and signals. Let me explain that for a moment by looking at a subject that Dr. Bidyut Das actually initiated me to understand, which is the microbiota inside our system. If you look at this chart here, it is, don't read too much into the chart because this is a subject so huge, it cannot be explained in one chart. But we are not who we are. There's a microbial system inside of us. So the microbial system is actually inside the guts, and there are, trillions, not billions, but trillions of microbes were continuously humming inside our intestinal system. And through the vagus nerve, they're processing a huge amount of, teradata after teradata of information. We talk about big data. This is bigger than big data. The microbes are actually processing huge amount of data, and they're sending signals through the vagus nerve all the way from the enteric brain to the brain inside of our head and influencing the cells that we talked about. So, there is a huge amount of signaling going on right now, right this moment, inside of your anatomy and my anatomy. And if those signals are not happening in a correct way, then it can play havoc with our system. How big is the microbial system, the microbiota? If we were to be able to harvest all the microbes and weigh them, they would weigh close to 2 kilograms. So those tiny little invisible microbes, if you collect all of them together, would be as weighty as 2 kilograms. There are at least half, if not more, of our body which consists body cells, which are not really our body cells. They're microbes. They're microbial cells. So I'm not just me. I'm a collection of all the microbes, and I depend every moment on the signaling capability of the microbes. So they are signaling to me on all kinds of things. They're signaling to me for food, they're signaling me for cognitive behavior, they're signaling me for, the neuroprotection, they're signaling me for neuropsychiatric conditions. And the brain in turn is signaling to them all the time. So, we need to be able to understand the power of signaling. If there is continuous signaling that is going inside of me, as I told you, our view of the world, external world, is in the same image as the view inside. So we need to understand the power of signaling outside. Look at this chart here. So in the middle of the chart, you see a painting. Now, first-year medical students in some of the Western universities are actually sent to art museums to learn about art appreciation. It's an exercise in signaling. So if you look at this piece of art, it's an art by the great Van Gogh. And in this, you will see the totality of the picture, the big picture, the complete picture. But those who are artistically inclined or trained, you will realize that it is not just one picture, but it is millions of tiny brush strokes. So if you look at, for example, the field of flowers, you'll find that there is a gradation, there's a variation. That variation of color is happening because of brush strokes, tiny brush strokes. Now, some people will be able to, when they're shown a picture, will be able to see the big picture and also be able to appreciate the minor brush strokes that are causing the variation. So why do medical students get trained on art appreciation? Because your patient's face is a work of art. And your patient's face, when you see your patient's face, it is not just one face, but there is variation, which is best represented by the thermal image that I have on the right-hand side. So you see the variations in the thermal image. So when you understand the power of signaling, you can read the signals. There are signals coming from the painting, there are signals coming from the face of the patient here. And by paying attention to the differences in brush strokes, you are also training yourself to pay attention to the differences in the thermal grading. And when you elevate your capability, your feelings, then you will be able to read the thermal image of the patient without realizing that you are reading the thermal image of the patient. I'm an energy form. You're seeing a body, but an evolved physician doesn't have to see the body, will be able to see the thermal image. And one such doctor was Dr. Bidhan Roy, Dr. B.C. Roy, and legend has it that he did not need any tools or instruments. When a patient would walk in through the door, he would look at the face of the patient and know exactly what the problem of the patient is. That is because he's able to penetrate the thermal field, see the variations on the face, a tiny twitch in the eye, a slight discoloration of the skin will change the way that one doctor and another doctor would actually look at the prognosis. So this is all about signaling and how well we read signals. Now, I'm going to switch topics from signaling, from intelligence to feelings and signaling. Now more about feelings and empathy and the idea of doctors as God. You know, when you are able to do these things, then you can mislead yourself to believe that a doctor is actually God himself or God herself. For that, look at this picture here. So you'll see in this picture all the white coats. The power equation is with the white coats here. People in the white coat. You look at the expressions. You see all kinds of expressions. You see expressions which are patronizing, expressions of great wisdom, expressions of having solved a complex equation, expressions of self-glory, and they're surrounding this patient. It's a classic picture, though I'm using a largely Caucasian, hospitals example, Caucasian-dominated hospitals example here, but you will see non-Caucasian faces as well, and I can see at least 2 Indian faces there. Forget about the skin color, but this is the picture of a typical medical ward in the morning when you are taking your round, quote-unquote round of the ward, something that every patient is waiting for. And look at the face of the patient herself. In this picture, where is the power? The power is distributed among the doctors, but you can make out in this collection who is the most powerful. And in this moment, the doctor actually thinks that he is God. It can go to your head. I had my own personal moment of this, and I want to tell you that story. As a 22-year-old, I was admitted at the All India Institute of Medical Science, first with relapsed viral fever, which was thought to be typhoid. I was treated with that, nothing happened. And as I told you, it was a relapse, so I went back again got admitted. And I was nearly in a state of delirium. The fever was not coming down from 104, 103, sometimes going beyond 104. And I was like a lump of flesh lying on the bed for days together. And then one such round took place, and the head of medicine stopped, and on the tailcoat of the head of medicine were a clutch of doctors and nurses with the medical reports in their hands. And the doctor looked down at me, and he was looking very well-fed, and he was looking very smart, and he was looking very capable. He looked down at me and in a very perfunctory manner said, young man, you have tuberculosis. And you know what? It'll get treated. You'll be all right. And he just walked away. So it was like somebody telling me, congratulations, you have won the lottery. Okay. So a 22-year-old was full of life. And just so you know that I was married at a very young age. So only few months before that I was married. And I'm lying in this hospital bed, not knowing what is going on. And here comes a doctor who says, you have tuberculosis. You'll be all right. And walks away. Contrast this with the time that my mother, who was in her late 70s, early 80s, and one day I came back from work, and it was customary for mother and son to sit down and have a cup of tea together. And I would go and, she was blind. So I would go and talk to her for a few moments, get her from the bed, and we go to the dining table and we have our cup of tea and our chat. And that day when I went to get her from her bed, I found that she was motionless. She was breathing softly, but she was motionless. And immediately I realized something is wrong. I called the doctor. Fortunately, he was around. And he came and said that looks like she may have suffered a stroke. So we quickly bundled her. I actually literally carried her like a baby in my arms, put her in a car and drove to the Manipal hospital in Bangalore. And for the next 48 hours, she was in that state of coma where she was motionless. She was not expressing herself. There was nothing on her face. Her whole body was motionless, but she was breathing. There's nothing really that doctors can do at that stage. You can't do anything interventional. So you just keep a watch and keep the minimum level of functioning of the body so that you wait for the body to be able at some point in time to receive intervention. So those 2 days, I was all alone in the room as an attendant. So you have your mother lying on the bed, motionless. You don't know what's going on in her mind, whether anything is going on in her mind. You don't know whether she is listening, she is able to know. Whether when you speak to her, it reaches her. You have no idea. So she is lying there, and I'm sitting on my bed. But occasionally, a young nurse would come, and that nurse would come to take care of her. But before she would touch her, she would softly talk to her and say, Aji. Aji is grandmother in Kannada. Aji, I'm going to take your temperature. And then she would take her temperature. After some time, she would come and say, Aji, I'm going to brush your teeth. And this motionless patient is there. She would gently brush her teeth and go away. Then she would come and say after a while, Aji, I'm now going to bathe you. So she would bathe her. So every time she would do something to my mother's body, she would first call her softly Aji, and then she would go doing her work. She would first explain what she is trying to do, and then do her work. 19-year-old, cannot be more than 19-year-old young nurse. So here's a doctor who says, you have got tuberculosis, you'll be all right, and moves away. And here's a nurse who says, Aji, I'm going to take your temperature. That is about feelings. That is about interpersonal skills. Now, since we are talking about doctors as God, and I told you about the difference between the doctor in All India Institute of Medical Science and this 19-year-old nurse, I need to tell you a little bit about my own experience with the medical world before we come back to the discussion about synaptic space. I've been fascinated with doctors and paramedics. And I've been fascinated with medical institutions around the world. So I've spent time with the Arvind Eye Hospital, which is the largest eye hospital in the world, set up by a visionary doctor called Govindappa Venkat Swami, Dr. V, as is affectionately called. I've spent time with institutions like NIMHANS, where I had co-founded something called the White Swan Foundation for Mental Health. I've spent time with the Mayo Clinic in the United States, looking at how they work internally. I've spent time with, tiny doctors in the back or beyond, like the Christian Medical Hospital in Bisam Katak, which is a very respected, very renowned hospital. And along the way of making friends with doctors, I've been very fascinated with their work and persuaded some of my doctor friends to show me how they do a knee surgery. So I told an orthopedic surgeon friend of mine that I want to be there to get to see the new knee surgery. So he said, what for? And I said, finally I have to get my knees replaced, right? So I might as well see how you people do, What is the finesse with which you do a butcher's work? So I want to see the knee surgery. And I was in the operating theater, wearing the gown, sterilized, and watched the knee surgery. Then I went and talked to a neurosurgeon friend of mine and said, I want to see a brain surgery. So actually, there was a visiting professor from a Japanese university who was doing a brain surgery and doing a live demonstration of that. So I saw the brain surgery. I know Dr. Devi Shetty personally, lucky to be have been in Bangalore for many, many years. And one day I told Dr. Devi Shetty, I said, I want to see how you actually operate. And he said, so come along. And I saw a cheese hole surgery. Those of you who do not know what it is, some children, because of congenital problem, they are born with tiny holes in their heart. And these are called cheese holes, pretty much like holes you see on the body of a cheese. So the cheese holes cause trauma in breathing, and many times you have a blue baby because the baby is laboring for oxygen and the heart is not pumping well enough like a normal heart. So basically you have to now do cheese hole surgery, minutely stitch up all the holes. So imagine a 2-month-old, that's the first surgery I saw, a 2-month-old baby this big, and the heart of that baby was about this big. So you have a team of 8 or 10 doctors and nurses who do what can end up being a 6-hour operation, standing all the time on the 2 legs. And the baby's heart and lungs in that moment being run by a heart-lung machine. So you see that process of a cheese hole surgery. And at the end of that process, then Dr. Devi Shetty took me to another operating theater where an older child he was performing. So we spent the whole day together. After those tiring 2 operations, in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, he went into his OPD. And there were about 60 patients waiting in the OPD. About 60 patients and their relatives. So I was already feeling tired at the end of the day. And Dr. Devi Shetty, we had our lunch together, was not looking tired. He was ready for the 60 patients. He saw every patient one by one. And before the patient is being presented to him, the entire dossier of the patient is in front of him. So there is the ultrasound report, there is the MRI, the CT scan report, all of that, and whoever doctor has pre-processed has given the recommendations and given the prognosis and whatever else. So the whole dossier is in front of Dr. Devi Shetty. But very funnily, I found after the 15th or 20th patient that he had seen, I found that with every patient, he is doing 3 things. One is he is, without referring to the dossier in front, during the conversation with the patient, he's physically touching the patient, every single patient. Maybe for a few seconds, but he touches the patient. The second thing I found is that most of his patients are actually from states like Odisha and states like Bengal, and also from Bangladesh. A lot of Bengali patients come there. And then there are patients from Andhra Pradesh and patients from neighboring Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and of course from Karnataka. But the Karnataka patients are less. The patients are from all over the place. There are patients who speak only Hindi and nothing else. So with every patient, Dr. Devi Shetty has a word speaks something to the patient, and in the broken language that he can master, he speaks the patient's language. 2-3 words, 2-3 sentences. He doesn't speak to them in English. He doesn't talk to a Hindi-speaking patient in, some other language. In his Hindi or his Bengali is very broken. But with that, he will say something to the patient in the patient's language. And the third thing was very interesting. When you were meeting Dr. Devi Shetty, who's one of the busiest doctors that you will come across, you will expect to find that he is pressed for time. You will quickly process the patient and he will say next patient. And the patient is also very aware and very conscious that you are seeing Dr. Devi Shetty, so he's respectful. That quickly after he has done something, then you want to move on. So there's an uncomfortable silence, or rather comfortable silence, because a supreme connection has been made, and there's a comfortable silence. The patient is not going, but patient is ready to go. And then Dr. Devi Shetty says, do you have a question? And you would think that, he should really move on, because there are so many other patients waiting. But with every patient, he says, do you have a question? So, aapko kuch puchna hai. Apni kichu jigges korben. Whatever the language, will say, do you have a question? And most patients did not have a question. So, okay, they're very happy that Dr. Devi Shetty has seen them. And every time he would put his stetho on the patient's body, and then I asked Dr. Devi Shetty, what is this? First of all, tell me about this stetho. You have the ultrasound report, you have the MRI report in front of you, you have the CT scan. Why the stetho? It's such an archaic thing. He says, only when I put the stetho on the patient's body that the patient thinks that the doctor has listened to my heartbeat. I'm a heart patient. Only when the doctor puts the stetho that the patient feels good that every person's heart is a unique heart. And my heartbeat is a unique heartbeat. And Dr. Devi Shetty has heard my heartbeat. So I said, tell me about the touch. He said something very interesting. He says the most important healing power that a doctor has is through touch. And it is the least understood thing. The power of touch is the least understood thing in our quest for technology, in our quest for, using all other medical tools and knowledge available with us. But we are born into this world with the power of touch. When a child sleeps on the mother's bosom, it is the power of touch. The most important sensation is the touch sensation. So if you have not touched your patient, you have not really started the healing process. The healing begins with the touch. But in this whole conversation, we may land up with the misleading notion that the doctor is God, doctor is central to the entire scheme of healing. So this picture shows you the golden hour. What is interesting is in this picture, there's no doctor. There's no doctor here. And you will know very soon, as part of your medical training, that 80% of patients would die in the course of the first hour. That's why it's called the golden hour. If you can do the right things the right way during the golden hour, then the chance of survival is higher. And the golden hour is not about the doctor. If you look at this chart here, 50% of the people who are suffering a trauma injury will die. 30% would die within hours. And these 80% of death will have nothing to do with the most competent doctor, will have to do with the paramedic, would have to do with the ambulance driver, would have to do with the two people who will accompany will immediately respond to the patient and put the patient safely inside an ambulance, contact the emergency room ahead of time. So their response is actually more critical to the saving of the life than the doctor himself or the doctor herself, who would probably come in the 20% of the graph. So there's no doctor here. Actually, in every hospital, the doctor is a minority. No more than 20% in a hospital, maximum 20% in a hospital, well-run hospital are doctors. So 80% of the people in a hospital are not doctors. So healing is with those 80%. And that is why you need to understand interpersonal relationship. That is why you need to understand interpersonal skill. It's not enough to be a doctor. So back to Dr. Devi Shetty's hospital in Bangalore. Dr. Devi Shetty's hospital is famous for pediatric surgery that I talked to you about, and has a success rate of 95%. So I asked Dr. Devi Shetty, what is 95%? Statistics can be misleading. So does it mean that 5% of the children will die? He said, no. 95% success rate means 95% of the children who are operated here will not come back to a heart hospital in their life. So 95% success rate is about not coming back to a hospital for life. How do you deliver 95% success rate? Then he says that it is not the doctor that delivers that 95% success rate, it is a nurse. Dr. Devi Shetty's Naran Pradalaya is one of the best nursing schools in the country, and the pediatric nurse in that hospital is one of the best trained nurses that you'll come across. And every child, every baby that I talked to you about, the cheese hole surgery baby, after the operation is kept in an ICU where the patient to nurse ratio is 1:1. Every child has a nurse. For the first 48 hours, every child, it is 24/7. So 24/7, every child has a nurse for the first 48 hours, and that is what delivers 95% success rate, not Dr. Devi Shetty. And it's not just the nurse. It is everybody else in the hospital. And now I'm going to tell you some fascinating things that I learned in one of the most respected hospitals in the world, which is the Mayo Hospital. Lots of books have been written on the Mayo Hospital, and sometimes, just as you should read Daniel Goleman and Howard Gardner, you should also read a book called The Hospital That the Mayo Brothers Built. You cannot go and join Mayo Hospital. You cannot apply for a job there. Mayo has to find you. That is the halo about Mayo. Mayo has to find you. And when, as a young doctor, you join Mayo, in the first few days of assimilation, you are taught about three things. One, you are taught this sacred thing about Mayo called not messing with the patient scheduler. I'll tell you what a patient scheduler is. The second is don't interrupt a patient when the patient is telling the patient's story. The patient is not equal to sickness. The patient is equal to the story. And the patient needs to tell you the story. Sometimes the story is long. Sometimes you have another patient waiting for you. But don't interrupt the patient. The third thing you are told is that you are not the most intelligent life form here, and no doctor, however capable, confident you are, you will not take the final decision by yourself. It has to be shared decision. You may be the greatest neurosurgeon. You may be the greatest medicine man. But you will not take the final call without consulting two other doctors. So it has to be a shared decision. But first, let me tell you about the patient scheduler. You see those two elderly ladies behind the counter, they're patient schedulers. Now, if you go to a place like Mayo, or for that matter, SCB Medical College or anywhere else, you will go through multiple tests. You'll go to multiple different specialties if there's a complexity in the case. So there are different clinics. And people come to Mayo from all over the world. People come with different economic power. People are there, they go with great hope to Mayo. But, after you reach there, after you reach a hospital for that matter, anywhere, you're very grateful that you're in a hospital. But the biggest thing that weighs in your mind after you have gotten admitted is how soon you can leave. There's a tremendous amount of pressure. You're really counting days. When can I go home? And when you go to, there are only 3 Mayo clinics in the United States of America. So people come from far away. And once they reach there, they have planned to go back. And if they can go back earlier than planned, it is a matter of great relief and great joy and sometimes great economics. Because it means saving the money. It means taking a cheaper airfare. The patient scheduler's job is to see how to save that time for the patient. Because the patient scheduler has got the exact routine, the exact calendar of different doctors in front of her on the computer screen. So the patient scheduler is to optimize the time that the patient will have between one doctor and another, one procedure and another, one test and another, and to see how a 7-day time in Mayo can be reduced to 5 days. Every doctor is told one sacred thing in Mayo is not to mess with the patient scheduler. If the patient scheduler calls you, you may be a demigod, but you listen to that patient scheduler. And if the patient scheduler wants to make some changes, keeping in mind the interests of the patient, you will give it a good hearing. You listen to the patient scheduler. Why? Because the Mayo Clinic patient scheduler is trained like an air traffic controller. Imagine that you are not in a hospital. Imagine that you are actually in an air traffic controller's cabin and you are the air traffic controller. So many planes are in the air. So many planes are landing. So many planes are taking off. And your job is to make sure that the whole process runs optimally. Which aircraft will keep rotating, keep hanging for a little while. Okay? Which one you will first allow to land. Which one you will let to take off. Which runway to clear up. It requires not just technology, but it requires a great processing mind. So the air traffic controller, actually runs the airport and is responsible for the safety of the aircraft and safety of the passengers. So the same approach of an air traffic controller, the patient scheduler works, and that is why the doctor in Mayo Clinic is told that the most important person in this hospital is the patient scheduler, because it is the patient's time that the patient scheduler is looking at. So don't mess with the patient scheduler. I have 2 more slides. We'll talk briefly about technology. So today, if you look at medical science, it is technology intensive. So this is a picture of a typical telemedicine center, and you run telemedicine centers in this hospital. Dr. Bidyut Das has been in the forefront of bringing telemedicine to the state. So when you look at a telemedicine center, and you see that the picture of the ultrasound is right on top, and you see the patient, and the doctor is sitting. You're using technology to heal, but you can also see that technology can be a barrier. Technology will not deliver feelings. Technology will not deliver the touch. Technology may fail to deliver the signal. So as we are deploying technology, we need to understand that we need to heighten our ability to read the signal. We need to heighten our ability to sense the signals through the computer screen. The patient is not the computer screen. Patient is not the image. Behind it all, the patient is feelings. The patient is a story. The patient is a Van Gogh painting with minor distortions in the thermal image that only the doctor with a sense of humanity can touch, feel, and understand. So you see this picture. This is a robo-doctor. The robo-doctor is going to be an absolute possibility in the next few years. So what is the role of doctors then? The robo will be trained to do most of the things that you can do. You have big data, you have artificial intelligence, you have machine learning, all that combined together, and given the cloud and given the connectivity, it will be possible for technology to disintermediate the doctor. You know, what does technology really do? Technology is a disintermediation tool. Today, between my sickness and my healing, the doctor is the intermediator. There is me, my sickness, and my healing. But without the intermediation of the doctor, I cannot go from point A to point B. But the biggest thing that technology does is it disintermediates. So between you and your money was the bank. The internet comes and disintermediates the bank. You can deposit money and withdraw money and do all financial transactions without going to a bank. You want to buy whatever you want to buy. There was a time when shops had opening hours and closing hours. But in Amazon, there's no opening hour and closing hour. You don't have to go to a mall to buy anything. You can buy everything on Amazon, from vegetables to 36-inch LED televisions, to computers, to medicine. You can buy anything. So what has technology done? What has Amazon done by the power of technology? It is disintermediating everything else. So even in medicine, a time will come when many of the mechanical things, routine things that the doctor does, will be taken over by the robo-doctor. So the medicine man will be actually replaced by the med machine. What this med machine cannot replace is the doctor with a higher power of intelligence. The doctor with the interpersonal skills. The doctor with the feelings. The doctor who can touch and feel and sense and smell and breathe the signals. So we talked about, in the beginning, the different interpersonal skills that the doctors must have. And this particular chart that I'm showing you here is a chart that is designed by the Carrington College. It's one of the colleges that trains medical professionals. And the Carrington College says, among all the interpersonal skills that you can think about, these are the most critical. Empathy, communication skill, teamwork, work ethic, stress management, positive attitude, flexibility, time management, confidence, and receptive attitude. And today, I mostly talk to you about empathy, communication skills, and a little bit about teamwork. The team which is not the doctor, the team which is the nurse and the paramedic and everybody else in the hospital, the 80% of the hospital that actually delivers the healing. As you move forward, This conversation must continue. And you need to explore each of these spaces. But you have to explore these spaces very differently than a classic behavioral skills training program can deliver to you. You need to look at it in terms of the signals, in terms of the synaptic spaces, in terms of the anatomy of interpersonal skills. This is Dr. Govindappa Venkat Swami, the man who founded the largest eye hospital in the world. This man became a doctor in a very unusual situation. He was in a tiny hamlet in the middle of nowhere in the state of Tamil Nadu, where the school that he attended to did not have a blackboard, so the teacher would tell the children to bring sand, riverbed sand with a hand, put the sand, flatten it on the ground and write the alphabets on the sand. That is how this man actually learnt his alphabets. When he was 7 or 8 years old, one day he heard loud wailing from the hut nearby, and he learnt that a young woman has died at childbirth. That 8-year-old child from a tiny hamlet in Tamil Nadu feels very strongly about it. It says nobody should be dying while delivering a baby, and says, I want to be a doctor. Finally, he becomes a doctor and joins the Indian Army, sometimes in 1940s. So his dream is fulfilled. He was a trained obstetrician, gynecologist. And within 1 year of joining the Indian Army, he didn't contract actually, you don't contract, but he developed a very rare form of rheumatoid arthritis that permanently crippled his fingers. His fingers are actually like this. So within that period, the Indian Army discharged him. He was without a job. And for a full year, he was in a hospital in Chennai, at that time Madras, where he couldn't get up from the bed. Now he's got twisted fingers. He can't do surgery anymore, or so people thought. He can't be a gynecologist anymore. Not just the fingers in the hand, but fingers in the legs also got twisted. So he couldn't walk properly. Then he went back and trained himself to be an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor. Worked as a government eye doctor till the age of 58 when he retired, and remained a bachelor because with all his deformities, he didn't want to marry somebody. And when he retired, whereas most people would have just gone to normal retirement, he, with his own savings, started a 11-bed eye hospital in Madurai, which now has become the world's largest eye hospital, where 30% of paying patients, actually whatever they pay because of the process efficiency of the hospital, makes up for the money that 70% of the patients cannot pay. They've done millions of surgeries free of cost. And this doctor is actually symbolic of man's fight against what is called needless blindness. Much of blindness is needless, is avoidable blindness. And Dr. Govindappa Venkat Swami has a famous line that says, intelligence and capability are not enough. There must be the joy of doing something beautiful. I would end this by showing this quote to you from Marcus Cicero, pronounced Cicero, man who lived between 106 and 43 before Christ. He said, in nothing do men more nearly approach the gods than giving health to men. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the class of 2021. Thank you for listening to me. Touch small people in your life more than you touch big people. We are trained to look up to people above us. Today you are a student, tomorrow you'll be an intern, day after tomorrow you'll be a doctor, and there will always be people above you. and we tend to look up to them and we suck up to them sometimes, and we are eager to touch them. Touch people below you. More you touch people below you, more the people above you will touch you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bagchi. In fact, after such a enlightening talk, which is so useful at the beginning of your career, I have nothing more to say. You know, everybody has a person whom he follows. And I'm pretty sure with this such nice, words to you, I'll not be surprised if many of you will be remembering him throughout your career. That the impact he must have made. So, few more things before we request him. I would like to ask the students, as usual, it should be an interactive. You rarely get such opportunity. So anybody who wants to know more than what he has said, if you remember, whatever slide Sir has shown to all of you, he started with one very important thing, that is empathy. Besides all the technical aspects of each thing that he has narrated so beautifully. And last, if I see the chart, is the receptive attitude. These are the two major qualities as you enter into this profession. You have to be empathetic and you should have a real receptive attitude. These are the two things which are of paramount importance as you progress through your career. As a token of our appreciation for enlightening all our students and the faculty alike, we would like to honor you with this very small compliment from our side.